What's shaking, everybody? You're listening to Improv Tabletop, the show that does all kinds of RPG stuff. We're doing a whole bunch of different games. It's all over the place, but we're not doing any games today. We're just having a nice little interview, getting to know my good friend
Thomas Ryan as Thomas Ryan.
Yes, in a drastic change of pace, you are finally playing yourself.
Finally, the hardest character to be.
Yeah, ain't it just the truth, though?
Yeah.
You can sit behind the mask of any number of characters and get away with all kinds of crazy things.
Turns out it's much easier to pretend to be someone else than to be yourself.
Yeah. Incidentally, I read an interview once from David Bowie where somebody was like, why do you do all these crazy personas? And he was like, well, I don't know how to write songs for myself, so I write songs for these other people, and it's much easier.
I think, yeah, that's fair. Sometimes it's good to separate you from what you're doing.
Yeah, so we're just walking in the footsteps of David Bowie. Well, to get started, let's get through these icebreaker questions here, the same ones that we've had for the rest of the cast. So first one, what is your favorite breakfast cereal?
That's a tough one. Growing up, my favorite was Apple Jacks, but as I've become an old man, I've learned the beauty of Captain Crunch berries.
Ooh.
Both pretty classic. I still will pound a box of Apple Jacks by myself, but I think Captain Crunch might have taken that slot.
Nice. I believe our friend Brett, who we've mentioned many, many times on the podcast by now, I think that's also his favorite.
You're going to have to interview him next at this point.
Yeah. We'll get him in here one of these days, probably, maybe, somehow. Next up, who's your favorite Winnie the Pooh character?
Oh, that's a tough one. Winnie the Pooh is... I don't love it. I hope my daughter isn't listening to this because she loves Winnie the Pooh. I'm going to go with either Owl or Rabbit. I like how arrogant Owl is, and I like how arrogant Rabbit is, but they're arrogant in different directions.
Interesting.
Arrogance is fun in a character, I think.
I could never have guessed that would be your opinion.
It's fine. Just don't analyze this, all right?
All right. We'll skip right over that then with what is your dream job or vocation?
Oh, geez. Dream job? Probably being like a park ranger or something, right? Like working for the National Park Service? That would be just incredible. That would be top tier. I would love to do something like that. But, it turns out it's really hard to work for the national parks because everyone wants to do it.
Yeah. Especially if you're trying to get into some of the more popular parks.
Yeah.
Like, do you have a guess of maybe which park you would go for?
Honestly, I just want to be a park guy. I would, wherever they send me, I'm down. As long as I can see a few trees, I'm going to be pretty satisfied.
Beautiful. So anywhere but like Dry Tortugas or something like that.
Even that I'd be cool with, honestly. Because, just being a park ranger would be cool. It doesn't, like, the where... It matters a little, but it doesn't matter that much.
Yeah, and there's not many trees down there, but there's a lot of water, which I guess... we've, I think, mentioned this a couple times, but we met working at Scout Camp back in the day.
Yeah, we did. I worked on Riverfront, so I was always in some body of water somewhere.
And I worked in the nature area, which was stereotypically full of all the nerds.
Yeah, for some reason there was a massive war between our two areas.
Yeah.
And much like Romeo and Juliet, we tried to find a way to unite our clans.
Yeah, I don't really understand necessarily why there was that rivalry, other than the fact that we were just super annoying down in the nature area.
Well, that, and not to get into the politics of a scout camp in Idaho too much, but the Riverfront kids were just a lot of jocks, a lot of dweebs. They were really into their own machismo. It didn't help that, the scouts thought the waterfront guys, Riverfront guys were super cool because they were working at the lake on a hot summer day. But yeah, I think that played into a lot. It was just kind of the area's own self-importance, I guess. But
yeah, all that aside, you, among all of the cast members, because of this meeting way back in the day, are the one that I have known the longest.
Yeah, what was it, last month or something? We have officially known each other longer than we haven't known each other.
Yeah.
Like greater than 50%.
Yeah, because we met when we were 15, we're currently 30, and so incidentally, that also means that was the moment when I started going by the nickname Ned.
Yeah, I forgot, because I didn't even realize, because it was the first time you'd really gone by Ned was working at camp, right?
Yeah, so I guess a little bit of the history. My first name is Braden, which is a fine name, but it's one that I found a lot of people have difficulty remembering for some reason. I've been called Broden and Brandon and Brady and Brundon, and I once got a letter addressed to Brenda, which was really weird.
Fun.
So I was at this meeting for these new Scout Camp people, and I was like, I want these people to be able to remember my name, time. And not too long before that, me and my friend Josh, who had invited me to that initial meeting, we discovered that if you flip my name around backwards, it's Ned Arb, and so we just shortened that to Ned. And so I was just like, hey, everybody, you can call me Ned if you want to, and boom, it's just stuck ever since, and now I have been Ned longer than I haven't been Ned.
It's not a bad thing, though. I think Ned fits you really well. If you had introduced yourself as Braden, certain names become people, and I don't think Braden became you.
Yeah, we would have started the rivalry between our areas much sooner had I introduced myself as Braden.
Would have been seconds, right after. Just get the bat out.
Yeah. Another fun little tidbit about the just growth of our friendship over the years is there is a long, long history of people assuming that we're brothers.
Yeah, and it still happens. So when we worked at camp together, like pretty regularly, I'd get called Ned, and I'm assuming you got called Thomas?
I did. Well, mostly I got called Skunk because that first year you had a big
you
old
don't have to bring that up.
blonde stripe in the middle of your head.
Yeah, so when I was 15, I decided to try and be cool and get a blonde streak down the middle of my hair, and it did not work. But yeah, I was called Ned a lot. You were called Thomas a lot. And even as recently as like last year, 2 years ago, something like that, we went to this middle of nowhere gas station to get snacks. And the lady who was checking us out was like, "Are you guys brothers or something?"
Yeah. And so we've decided actually just as of yesterday that whenever people ask us if we're brothers, we're just going to say, yeah.
Yeah, it's easier. I mean, at this point, I count you as a brother. It's been long enough now.
Yes.
You come to my house more often than my actual siblings.
Yeah, works for me. But yeah, now that we've gotten through all of our wonderful history, we can start talking about the podcast, which is, I'm sure, what people are actually here to listen to. They don't want to get to know us.
Scout Camp. This isn't a Scout Camp podcast.
Yeah. So, going through these questions, I'm realizing that your answers to these may be a little bit different than a lot of the rest of the cast, because our first question is, what is your history with improv and acting?
I've read half of one book on improv, and I have never acted beyond skits at a scout camp, coincidentally.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's my entire experience, plus what you've heard on the podcast, but I don't know if that counts as experience, since it's what I'm doing currently.
Well, you're working your way towards your, 10,000 hours? Is that what people say?
It's something like, to master something, you have to do it for 10,000 hours.
Yeah. So we've already got, 20-ish episodes of Blades in the Dao Fei.
Around an hour each.
Yeah.
I'm almost 1% of 1% of 1% there.
Yeah. But I think your case is a good one for our listeners to be able to examine, though, because one thing that you hear a lot in the online discourse about getting into RPGs is people start watching Critical Role or Dimension 20, and they'll see these really well-trained actors performing and get it all into their mind that's like, man, I never took an acting class. I can't be good at playing D&D or whatever other game I'm interested in. And yet here you are.
Are you saying I'm not good at acting?
No, what I'm saying is you are good at acting even though you never took any classes.
I mean,
imagine that.
Yeah, weird, right? Yeah, I mean, I spend a lot of time on the internet. Not something I like to admit, but it's the truth. Anywho, I do see pretty regularly what you're saying, where people just, they look at these guys like Matt Mercer and they just throw in the towel. There's no way you could ever achieve what Matt has done. And Matt's great, don't get me wrong. Pretty much any Matt in the tabletop community is great. Matt Mercer, Matt Colville, they're awesome at what they do. But you don't have to be a professional to be having fun, more importantly, than being good. I don't know. I don't like to toot my own horn, believe it or not. I know a lot of my characters do, but I personally do not. I have found that being on the podcast and, just kind of letting go and letting things happen and not worrying too much has solved a lot of the anxiety I've had with being a good player character. Yeah, I don't know if I even answered a question right then. I kind of just started rambling about stuff.
No, it's all good. I guess maybe one question that I have actually is, like, as you've been reading through Truth and Comedy, has there been any tidbits that you've picked up where it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense based on my experience with playing the game?
I mean, there's not been any like I can't quote a line from the book or anything. But the general vibe of the book has been kind of my own philosophy with playing tabletop games, right? Where you just kind of go with the flow. Whatever's happening, that's what's happening, and you just go along with it. You can add on to it. Try not to take something away unless by taking it away, you are adding to the story. Which is, it sounds backwards, because a lot of people know yes and that concept about improv. So hearing taking stuff away can add to it can be a little backwards, I guess.
Yeah.
It's tricky, but I think it can be helpful.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like, whatever you're doing, you want to make sure that the story is progressing forward in a meaningful and interesting way. And, you know, Aang got his bison stolen, which was something that was very big that was taken away from him, but added to his character in a very meaningful way.
Yeah, that's a perfect example. Taking away something, in that instance, it had a whole arc, and then it had a whole side arc where we followed Appa doing all his stuff.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was really cool. Granted, that was planned, because it's a TV show, it's not improv, but still, it's a great example of taking something away can add to a story.
Yeah, or maybe you take something away from the material world and put it into the spirit world, and...
Yeah, something really handsome and fun.
Yeah.
And everyone loves him, whatever it may be.
Yeah. But with kind of that idea of making sure you're always adding something, I think my favorite analogy I've heard, like a visual for the principle of yes and, is it's like, you know, building a house. When somebody puts down a brick, you've only got a single brick. You need a bunch of bricks to make a house, but you come in and you look at that brick and you say, yes, I accept that brick. And as you're doing that, you're putting some mortar on top of the brick, and then you bring in your own brick, and then you say, and I'm going to add this one on top of yours. So the yes is the mortar connecting the two ideas, and the and is each additional block that's being placed to help build this house together.
I like that. I've never heard that before. But that's really fitting.
And so as long as you're bringing in your bricks and making sure you're putting down a little bit of mortar beforehand, then boom, you got a whole bunch of people making a beautiful building together.
Very nice. I like that a lot. I'm going to steal that.
Nice. The next question then would be, what is your history with geekery in general and with tabletop RPGs specifically?
Jeez, geekery in general?
Yeah.
I played with Legos when I was a wee lad. I had a lot of Bionicles, if you remember those.
Oh, heck yeah.
I love Bionicles, man. I played... There was a game on, like, Lego.com or something where you were one of the Bionicle guys doing your Bionicle thing. I loved that. That was so fun. When I went to my grandma's house for, like, family dinners, they had a computer upstairs that had the original Sonic and Sonic 2 on it. And so I played that a ton because I didn't want to talk to my family.
Yeah.
Not that they're bad, but I was just antisocial. I still am, but I was then too.
Man, we are the same person.
Who would have thought? Brothers. Anywho, so I mean, I've got a long-standing, just generally with video games are really where my geekery comes from, but I branched out into other stuff. I read comics. I read all the weird fantasy books, like Charlie Bone, if you remember Charlie Bone from back in the day.
Oh, holy cow, there's a blast from the past.
I loved Charlie Bone when I was a kid. Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, you know, the big ones. But yeah, geek-wise, I've never not been in it. As far as tabletop, though, that is pretty fresh. I started, 4 years ago now with you as Big Daddy DM. We were playing, we just met up for lunch one day. It was not long after my daughter was born. And I don't know who mentioned it first, but one of us mentioned it D&D. And I said, oh man, I want to play D&D. It looks so fun. And then you said, no way, I have a D&D group. And one thing led to another, and 4 years later, I've tried, I don't know how many systems now, 5 or 6. If we don't count the ones that, you know, we played for like 20 minutes and then moved on, then yeah, 5 or 6. And I'm in a podcast about it. So yeah. It's taken something of a turn. I didn't expect tabletop to be such a big piece of my life.
Yeah, it's interesting as well. Like, even actually just in the course of this discussion, I'm starting to realize even more similarities. Because, like, I consider myself to be, I don't know, I feel like all of the kids in my family are the black sheep of the family in some way or another. But I feel like I'm the one who's kind of diverged the most because I've been the one who's most interested in just all the really geeky stuff and all of the, like a lot of my siblings took music classes and took acting classes as well, but I was the one who started to really lean into that.
Yeah.
And so, yes, while, you know, my family is great, I get along well with all of them, I was very antisocial, and I would just sit upstairs in my bedroom reading books and playing Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney all the time, etc., etc.
I still haven't played that. I've heard good things. I've never played a Phoenix Wright game.
You know, I was actually talking with my brother, my real brother, my actual biological blood brother the other day.
Yeah.
And we were like, you know, we played all of these games because I convinced him to try them out. And we were like, yeah, we played these, but I couldn't actually tell you a single, like, plot point of what happened in these games. But that's neither here nor there. What is here right now is the fact that we are both massive geeks, and that has brought us together.
Yeah, somehow. Who would have thought working at a scout camp would unite weirdos?
Gosh.
God, that's one time at scout camp.
Oh boy, before we get into that, what is your history with Avatar?
With Avatar? Actually, Avatar has been kind of a weird one for me. I remember I watched it when it first released, like on cable network television back in the day. But I was like 12 or something at that time, so I wasn't religiously watching it. When it was on, I would watch it and be happy. And I never actually saw the finale until I was like, I want to say 16, 17. I was still living at home, but I was definitely a lot older. I'd kind of moved on from it. But it was on Netflix, so I started watching it again, and it was awesome when I was a kid. It was awesome when I was an older kid. It was awesome now as an adult.
As the oldest kid.
As the oldest kid. When I was a big boy, a big grown-up boy, I started watching it on Netflix again because I remember really liking it. It had somewhat of a resurgence in pop culture, so I thought, it's been a while, let's try it. And turns out it was still great. And then I tried watching Korra. I don't care what the people say. I loved Korra, beginning to end. Even the weird Unalaq stuff was awesome. The spirit kaiju fight was, I've never seen something like it. It was cool. I really dig it. If it wasn't popular, fine. It was at least unique, and I thought that was good. So I've done all that. I've read the Kyoshi novels. I've got the Yang Chen novel. I still haven't gotten through that one, but it's in my big list of stuff to read. And I haven't read the comics, but I've heard good things. So I guess it's a long-winded way of saying I've liked Avatar a long time.
Yeah, you have delved into quite a few of like the side sort of things as well, which I guess makes you one of the preeminent Avatar scholars of this podcast in some ways.
I don't know if I'd call me a scholar. I know a lot about the Kyoshi era because of the Kyoshi novels, but past that, I didn't know who the Mother of Faces was.
Yeah, that's in one of the comic books, incidentally.
But look at that. I got to read those comics.
Yeah, they're pretty good. And let's see. Oh, this is... So the next question is, who are your top 3 characters that you've played on the podcast, and what do you enjoy about them?
So number 1, probably Wei Young. Number 2 would be Day. And number 3 would be Wei Young.
Ah, there you go.
Because I haven't played many characters on the podcast, which is kind of a funny story how I ended up on the podcast. When Ned first started making Improv Tabletop, I'd known about it. I'd known what he was working towards. I knew roughly the plan, using Fate, doing improv, blah, blah, blah. We were chatting one night, and I told him explicitly, I have no interest in being on the podcast. I don't want to do this. And it was true, because at the time I really didn't want to be on the podcast, because a lot of it was, I have never done improv. At that point, I'd only done a little tabletop, so it didn't really, like, we were pals, I knew what he was working on, but I didn't want to interfere with it. I didn't want to, get in the way of the other people who are, much more talented than I am. But then Blades in the Dark happened, and he and I had been talking about Blades in the Dark for a while, and I really wanted to do a Blades in the Dark game, so I broke my rule like a year and a half afterwards of saying it, and now I'm doing Avatar Legends too. So
yeah,
there it is.
Yeah, it's so cool to see that the people on the Discord have started to like get together and play their own games.
Yeah,
it makes me feel.
By the way, Mitch, if you're listening to this, like, you did a heck of a good job last night. We literally last night, as of this recording, played an Avatar Legends one-shot run by Mitch, one of our patrons, and it was phenomenal. He did a really good job, and he improv'd it, like the whole thing. He followed the tenets, right? And if he hadn't have said that, I wouldn't have believed it, because it just felt natural. Everything just flowed. My co-players, Tetraslash and V, awesome. It was the first time V had ever played it, and just killed it. Like, I wouldn't have known if they hadn't said anything, so... Yeah, it was really fun. Really fun. I'm glad that the patrons are getting together and doing things. It's been cool.
Yeah, and also I think should shout out Michael Sear and, oh gosh, I've never quite been sure how to pronounce this, Sebamsh or something like that.
I think Sebamsh is right.
Yeah, got together and did the Wander Home session as well. Just really cool to see these people getting together and, building up this community, which you, dear listener, can be a part of if you join our Patreon at the $5 or higher tier. Oh boy. Oh gosh, I felt sick to my stomach.
Yeah, that's a little gross.
Yeah, as I turned this heartfelt community moment into a shameless shill for our Patreon.
Look at this naturally occurring thing that you too can pay to be a part of.
Yes, exactly. I'm going to move on from that right now. I guess going back to your top 3 characters, what do you enjoy about these characters?
I mean, Wei Young and Day are very different from each other, even though they're in the same game. Wei Young is, I think, probably what I enjoy most about both of my characters is just the unyielding confidence, which is kind of a bad habit I've built as far as tabletop characters go, because some of them should not be as confident as I make them, but I, the player, I view tabletop as just a way to do the impossible. And so instead of the usual, like, oh, we should wait and see and blah, 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 I'm like, yeah, let's just charge in. It'll work out, which is good for some of the, some characters, but other ones it doesn't make a lot of sense. So I really enjoy the confidence of both of them. Wei Young, I really like just how much of a tool I've managed to make him be. My very first D&D character, I tried to make him evil, and I had a really hard time playing that. So I ended up, having character growth and blah, blah, blah. He became a good guy. A little mean, but a good guy. So having Wei Young actually suck has been pretty fun. Day, so one of my inspirations for Day is from the Yogscast. If you guys are familiar with them, they were a Minecraft gaming channel back in the day. They do a lot of stuff still, but that's what I knew them as, was Minecraft. And one of the people named Simon, he had a character named Professor Griswold, and pretty much Professor Griswold's thing was, I am loud. And so Day has taken on that personality trait. Nice. And I really like that too. Just the volume at which he is nice, I think is fun. Yeah,
definitely an interesting duality between these two characters. Obviously, we talked about how Day is super supportive and just always, he's ride or day. That's kind of his main character trait. But I gotta say, there is something fun, speaking to kind of enjoying making a character who is kind of unflappably terrible. I mean, Riven the Chemist, I have deliberately gone out of my way to make him as detestable as I can. And
it's worked.
There's just, I will admit, there's something fun about making a character that you want people to hate and succeeding.
Yeah, in real life, I try not to be a tool. It happens, but I try not to do it if I can. So having a character where I'm just like, man, screw orphans. It's what tabletop's all about, right? It's kind of that fantasy of being someone you're not. I get to be a jerk. I get to bully orphans. Not that real me wants to do that, but it's a fun way to, a fun thing to explore. How about that?
Mm-hmm. Man, this is, I'm also putting some pieces together in my brain. This is why a system like Savage Worlds is really good for someone like you, because you can mechanically make your character a horrible person or be super overconfident and actually get mechanical benefits from that.
Are you trying to pitch Savage Worlds on this right now?
Everybody, Savage Worlds is great. You should play Savage Worlds.
Good heavens. Savage Worlds is great. I've enjoyed it quite a bit.
Yeah, and I don't feel bad about shilling that because it's not my own product. It's just something I really like, and I think more people should play.
Hey, that's fair. Yeah.
Let's see. Next question. We're getting into the final couple here. Do you have any advice for people who want to get into improv?
I don't know if I am qualified to say that. I've never done improv in the traditional sense. I've only ever done it on this podcast or playing other tabletop games. So I guess my advice would be probably play tabletop, and yeah, that's the big one. Don't be afraid. I know that's like generic advice, right? Don't be scared, but if you want to do something, you have to be brave sometimes. And really the best time to be brave is when you're scared, because if you're not scared, why would you be brave about it? Mm-hmm. So yeah, just throw yourself into it. If you can find a table of people that you trust and you're comfortable around, that's a good starting point. If you can't, strangers are even better because they're never going to see you again. So you can be as weird as you want to be. So that would be my advice.
Yeah. And that's actually also like if you're wanting to like practice some improv, but there's certainly a very intimidating thing about getting up on a stage in front of a whole bunch of people who have paid to watch you entertain them. That's intimidating. But if you're just with a group of a bunch of other dorks who want to play a game for a little bit, it's pretty low stakes as far as things go.
Yeah, definitely.
But then on the other side of that coin, any advice for people who want to get into tabletop gaming?
I also don't know if I'm really qualified to answer that one. Because I knew a guy, and then I never left that guy. I know a lot of people have, kind of these horror stories of, I've been trying to find a group for a year, blah, blah, blah. Everyone sucked. But I've been lucky. I've had Ned, who is a phenomenal DM. As a result of that, I've had a few other DMs for other campaigns that were pretty great. Shout out Evan, shout out Mitch. So, I mean, I don't know if I can answer that well. I can give some generic advice if you want that.
Sure.
Okay, cool. If you want to get into tabletop, you can go check out your local game store. There should be games there. Where I live, there are 4 game stores, and as far as I'm aware, all of them run D&D at least, which is going to be your easiest bet to get into tabletop stuff. D&D is the big boy. If that doesn't work for some reason, go online. The beauty of the internet means you can find a game anywhere at any time if you just want to look. Furthermore, if that doesn't work, run your own game. You don't have to have played D&D to DM a game. So just find a system that looks cool, read the rulebook, say, hey, I'm starting a game. You will have people coming out of the woodwork because the ratio of GM to not GM is super skewed to not GMs. Mm-hmm. So there you go. That's the 3 ways you can play tabletop tonight if you wanted to.
There you go. Thank you for listening to our BuzzFeed listicle about how to get into playing D&D.
Generic, baby. It's all I know.
I will say just another thing that I really enjoy is even if putting together a group ends up being hard, there's just a lot of joy to be found in reading these books. Like, I have more D&D adventure books than I will be able to run in my lifetime probably, but they're really fun to just read. Like, I don't actually read much fiction these days. I just read like D&D and Pathfinder and Deadlands adventure books and that kind of stuff. And it's a great way to spend, use up some free time, just get into a cool fantasy world. What I think I really enjoy about reading adventure books over reading like a fantasy novel, for example, is as much as Brandon Sanderson is a great story crafter and he makes these really compelling worlds with really compelling characters, there's something I love about reading a book and not saying, hey, this is what does happen or what is going to happen, but it's like, this is what has the potential to happen within this world.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think there's something really cool about that.
Kind of going along with that, because I've had an idea now that I've heard you talk. There are certain tabletop systems that you can play by yourself. Off the top of my head, Wanderhome, one that we were talking about just earlier, it does have a section on how to play solo. There's a Lord of the Rings game called The One Ring, and there is a version of that where you can play it solo. One that I've not played is Ironsworn. I've heard a lot of good things about that one. I believe you're a Viking or something, and you can play that one alone. So if you just want to get into like trying out these systems, fiddling with the rules, all that kind of stuff, that might be a good option for you if you can't find other people to play with.
Yeah, shout out to another person on our Discord, Swess, who was talking up Ironsworn to us. And also Sabampsh, sorry for how I'm pronouncing that, has also been involved in Ironsworn. I've heard good things about it. I haven't gotten around to it quite yet, but even then some of the more popular systems, like the Call of Cthulhu starter set, comes with a solo choose-your-adventure style thing that you can go through. They have a couple more similar to that on their website that you can try. There's the Mythic GM emulator, which, what's the name of the show? It's called Me, Myself, and Die, I think is what it is. This guy who shows you how to use the Mythic GM simulator, whatever it's called, I don't know. I haven't used it, but it's something that if you're interested in playing a game by yourself, you can give it a look.
Oh, isn't there a... so Ned and I have a game night, not every Sunday, but somewhat regularly, and there is a 5e, like, GM-less campaign that we were thinking about playing once.
Yes. The Blood Queen's Defiance.
Yeah, Blood Queen's Defiance. Yeah, so if you want to try out D&D specifically, that would be a good option too.
Yeah, that is produced by Limitless Adventures, and after that one got successfully funded on Kickstarter, I'm pretty sure they made a couple more of them as well. And they've also got, I'm on their website now. They've also got solo GM-less adventures. Lost in the Dark is the one I'm seeing here. So there's options out there for you.
Yeah, if for whatever reason you can't find one other person to play a game with, then there are solo options available to you.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's a beautiful world to be a part of.
Now's the best time for it too. Mm-hmm. Like, shoot, 10 years ago, none of this would have been happening.
Yeah, I mean, 10 years ago was kind of when things just were really starting to get big in the space that we are currently inhabiting.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the end of our list of written questions. But do you have anything else that you want to share with all of our friends out there in podcast world before we wrap up?
At the end of the day, you're going to die eventually.
Yeah.
You might as well have fun before you get there. So don't let the fear rule you. Go and play a game with strangers, with friends. It doesn't matter. Just go enjoy yourself.
Yeah. In the words of REO Speedwagon, I think it is, live every moment, love every day, because before you know it, your precious life slips away.
Sure. Why not?
I mostly know that because I listen to The Worst Idea of All Time.
What is the worst idea of all time?
Oh, gosh. Okay, well, one final plug.
Is that relevant to this podcast?
One final plug before we wrap up. There's a podcast called The Worst Idea of All Time. It's produced by Tim Batt and Guy Montgomery, two guys from New Zealand. And the initial premise was they were going to watch the movie Grown Ups 2 every single week for a year and review it every single week for a year. And they did that, and it was popular enough that they did Sex and the City 2, and they've been doing movie after movie since then. And what's so fascinating about it is it's not so much like it is a bit of a window into film production and the world of Hollywood and whatnot, but more than that, it's kind of an introspection, like a closer look into the minds of two increasingly embittered humans trying to deal with this terrible thing that they've brought upon themselves.
So it's just a view of the slow descent into insanity.
Yeah. And if you want one that's maybe a bit more accessible to get into, they teamed up with the McElroy brothers to create a podcast called Till Death Do Us Blart, where every year on American Thanksgiving, they watch and review Paul Blart Mall Cop 2. And that is annual for the rest of linear time. When one of them dies, they're going to find somebody to replace them. That's the idea, at least. They haven't gotten close to that point yet. But yeah, just a couple podcasts that I really enjoy.
So theoretically, at some point, there's going to be like 4 80-year-old men and one 20-year-old just guy who was born way after Paul Blart 2 ever existed.
It's possible.
Wonderful.
Honestly, Till Death Do Us Blart might be my favorite podcast.
That tracks.
So yeah, if you want something just absurd and meaningless, but also just a nice way to put some stuff into your ears while you're doing chores or whatever the case may be, I recommend it. That's neither here nor there. Well, as we're getting to the end of this here podcast, thanks everybody for listening, and you'll be hearing us again doing all kinds of crazy stuff with Improv Avatar. And man, I don't want to go through the whole big spiel that I've got written out. We've got Fate campaigns, we've got Avatar campaigns.
At this point, they've been listening.
Yeah, we've got our sister podcast, iCast Fireball.
We got other stuff. Go listen to it.
Yeah, so that means I get to plug whatever I want. I'm going to plug Savage Worlds and The Worst Idea of All Time and Till Death Do Us Blart.
Perfect.
Well, until the next time, thanks for joining us. I am Ned Wilcock, your host and GM, and I've been joined by
Thomas Ryan.
As Thomas
I'm just
Ryan.
me.
Yeah.
I'm not as Thomas Ryan. I am Thomas Ryan.
Yeah, getting real with ourselves. Well, everybody, much love and stuff. We'll catch you next time on Improv Tabletop.
Well, wait, does the outro change for the cast interviews?
This is just going to be our normal, regular guitar theme song that we started with back in the day.
I will allow it. You can do that if you want.
Good, because I am in charge of everything, and you don't get to tell me what to do.
Sorry, God, I didn't know.
It's all right. I love you anyway.